welcome back to Whispers of Turkish Stars. Settle in, because today we're pulling at a delicate thread that has quietly unraveled into a full-blown obsession across timelines and group chats. The question at the center of it all: what's the real story behind the single letter glinting on Cemre Arda's bracelet? Is it simply a pretty trinket, or is that G a whisper meant for one person alone? Gökberk Yildirim? If you live for the hidden meanings in small details and the way tiny clues can echo through an entire love story, you are exactly where you need to be. And before we dive into the thick of it, make sure you're subscribed to Whispers of Turkish Stars and that your notifications are on, because we bring you the feelings, the frenzy, and the facts that everyone else is scrambling to interpret. Let's start with what we all saw. In photos from a casual afternoon outing. Coffee in one hand, sunshine on her shoulders, Cemre's wrist flashes a slim bracelet with a single charm, the letter G, simple. Elegant. But not simple at all once you remember the history that letter calls to mind. Because for anyone who has followed Cemre and Gökberk since they led that runaway hit together, a G is more than a letter. It is an echo of a time when scenes felt like confessions and lines felt like memories. It's the weight of 1,000 edits, 1,000 fan-made soundtracks, and the first time two actors' off-screen smiles felt a little too natural to be routine. The main theory hardly needs explaining because it wrote itself the moment the pictures landed. G for Gökberk. G for the man whose name still seems to trail after hers like a familiar chord. For a big part of the fandom, the bracelet wasn't just jewelry, it was a soft admission. A sentimental keepsake. A tiny, defiant promise to herself that not everything ends where people say it does. There were comments in every language, whispering the same idea: if she's wearing him on her wrist, maybe she never stopped wearing him in her heart. Of course, with celebrities, no detail exists in a vacuum. Cemre isn't just any star, she's a face that anchors headlines, a presence that transforms a room. And with that kind of attention, one letter can mean a lot or nothing at all. It could be the initial of a family member, a brand, a nickname, or even an inside joke. But you know how it goes: when a story has captured the public imagination the way Cemre and Gökberk's has, the obvious connection becomes almost impossible to ignore. They didn't just play lovers, they built a world together that people crawled inside and didn't want to leave. The camera loved them, and the audience loved what the camera saw. It's no surprise, then, that the G rattled something loose. Screenshots multiplied. Threads multiplied. There were collages and timelines, people zooming in and circling the gleam of the charm, pointing out that the letter was right side up in every photo, as if placed deliberately to be read. Some called it an intimate gesture, a quiet devotion she didn't dare speak out loud. Others insisted it was nothing but a gift with a coincidental initial. The conversations tangled up with old interviews, old jokes, and old looks. Those looks that once made everyone swear they were seeing something real between the lines. And because every symbol is amplified by timing, fans poured over what else was happening around the sighting. New projects for both of them. A few shared friends. The vaguest, most innocuous mentions in Q&As that seemed to dodge a fuller answer. Was the G a breadcrumb or a decoy? A little piece of memorabilia from a moment in time, or a sign that that moment never really ended? There's another layer to consider: his side of the story, or at least the sliver of it that he lets the world see. Has Gökberk reacted? Not publicly. He never does, not directly. But that only makes everyone more attuned to the quiet signals. A like here. A friendly comment on a mutual friend's post. An old behind-the-scenes shot that gets a sudden burst of engagement. To fans, these are not random, they're coordinates on a map that always leads back to the same place. Still, there's dignity in silence. Maybe he's protecting something fragile by refusing to name it. Maybe he's moved on. Maybe he's waiting. Or maybe there's nothing to wait for, and everyone's projecting their own desires onto two people who once played an ideal so convincingly it became a myth. If we shift perspectives again, a practical explanation emerges. Initial charms are everywhere. Not everything is a clue, sometimes a bracelet is just a bracelet. But here's the catch. When the wearer is Cemre, and the letter is G, the story writes itself whether she wants it to or not. That's the bargain celebrities make with the public. Every accessory, every glance, every choice is a syllable in a bigger narrative that fans can't stop reading out loud. It's both a burden and a strange kind of comfort. The audience wants to believe in the love story they helped elevate. They want to believe their favorite chapter still has pages to turn. Tabloids didn't waste a minute, of course. Photos splashed across feeds with headlines that rose and fell like heartbeats. Was it a sign? Was it a memory? Was it a subtle way of saying, we're fine, just not for public consumption? The bracelet made everyone a detective again, and that's part of its power. It's not just the letter, it's the chase, the sweet ache of trying to interpret someone else's poetry. Let's be honest. Cemre and Gökberk's story, whether it lives in private or in our collective imagination, has always thrived on subtext. They were never loud about their off-screen dynamic. They didn't need to be. It was there in the pauses and the laughter and the way comfort looked on them. And that's why this tiny charm carries the weight it does. A fan doesn't need a press release when they've already memorized 100 glances. But there's a cautionary note here, too. We rarely know the full truth. We stitch together a quilt from scraps and pretend it's the original garment. Cemre could be honoring a sibling. She could be playing with trends. She could be wearing a piece that came with a kind note from a designer looking for visibility. Or yes, it could be what so many hope it is, a relic of a love that remains, beating softly under the noise. You can feel the tension in the way fans talk about it, the way their voices soften when they say his name. It isn't just curiosity, it's yearning. The G becomes a wish disguised as evidence. They remember the late-night premieres, the candid moments, the interviews where the two of them grinned at nothing in particular. They remember how it felt when a scripted kiss looked unscripted. All those memories, gathered up and pressed like flowers, turn one tiny charm into a time machine. And then there's strategy. Could the bracelet be a clever nudge to keep the spotlight warm? A tease for a project that brings them back together on set? Imagine the marketing potential of letting a single letter stoke the fire before a grand reveal. The industry is fluent in suggestion. And yet, if it is calculated, it's an exquisitely gentle way to do it, no theatrics, just a glimmer and a question. But let's circle back to the simplest truth. Sometimes people keep tokens because they want to remember who they were when they wore them. Maybe the G isn't about anyone else at all. Maybe it stands for grace, for growth, for the way Cemre has been rebuilding the quiet parts of her life. People rarely consider that possibility because it's not as thrilling. It doesn't spark the same avalanche of comments. Still, intimacy often hides in plain sight, behind meanings that belong to the wearer alone. What we can say is this: the bracelet did what symbols always do in the world of stars. It made us feel close to something we're not entitled to see. It pulled us into a story without promising an ending. And as the photos kept circulating, something beautiful happened. The fandom started talking to each other again, sharing old edits, editing new ones, revisiting favorite scenes, laughing at familiar behind-the-scenes clips. The G turned into a meeting point for thousands of tiny reunions. In a way, that's as real as any official statement. If you ask the optimists, they'll tell you the G is proof. Proof that the door hasn't closed, proof that the thread hasn't snapped. Ask the skeptics, and they'll shrug. A coincidence. A trend. A shadow cast by a brighter light. Both sides are trying, in their own way, to protect themselves from disappointment on one side, from foolish hope on the other. That's the tug-of-war that keeps a mystery alive. Isn't that why we're here, after all? To linger in that space where facts end and feelings begin? To follow our favorite stories into the dark and find reflections of our own hearts there? Cemre's bracelet is no grand announcement, and yet it resonates like one because we're hungry for signs in a world that rarely offers certainty. We want to believe that love is patient, that timing can be rewritten, that the right people find their way back. And where does that leave Gökberk? Maybe exactly where he intended, present without posturing, careful with what he says and what he doesn't. Maybe he's learned the cost of giving everything to the spotlight. Maybe he trusts that the people who matter already know the truth, and the rest is noise. In that silence, fans hear everything they want to hear and everything they're afraid to hear. So no, we don't have a definitive answer. Not today. Not yet. But perhaps that's the answer the bracelet was designed to give. Not a yes. Not a no. Just a tender, shining maybe. A reminder that some stories aren't linear, and some bonds aren't undone by time or distance or pressure. The G may stand for a name. Or a memory. Or a dream that refuses to let go. Here's what we know: the moment the charm caught the light, people felt something. A ripple of hope. A pang of nostalgia. A flicker of wonder. Call it what you want, it's the reason we watch, the reason we care, the reason we show up every time the wind slips a secret under the door. Tell us what you think. Is the G for Gökberk? Is it a love letter written in silver? Or are we all chasing the sparkles of a bracelet because sparkle is the only language some feelings have left? Drop your theories, your stories, and your favorite memories of Cemre and Gökberk in the comments. Your voice is what turns a moment into a movement. If this deep dive made your heart race, or even just made you look twice at a tiny detail, tap like, send this to a friend who lives for these puzzles, and make sure you're part of our community here at Whispers of Turkish Stars by subscribing. We'll keep watching the clues, sifting the silence, and sharing what we find with you. Until next time, keep your eyes on the small things. That's where the loudest truths like to hide.